So I want to welcome everybody today to this very exciting monthly EveryStem session with my friend Courtney Zuber, who is the owner of Cone Flower Designs. And Courtney and I met through EveryStem, and coincidentally, we live pretty close to one another. I live just north of Austin in Georgetown, and Courtney lives a little further north of Austin in Salado. So I have gotten the opportunity to get to know Courtney personally and to spend a lot of time together and to actually freelance for her as well in her studio. So all the stuff you've seen on her reels and on her Instagram page, it's the truth. I can vouch for it. She is organized. She is the queen of making sure her shop is efficient, her studio is running in an organized fashion, and that her team members feel appreciated and valued, and that they are learning as they get into the business of floral design. So the most exciting thing that we want to talk about today is how we have both become profitable wedding florists. Wedding floral design is such a creative business, and there's so much that comes along with the design elements, and many of us are drawn into becoming floral designers because of the creative aspects. And so the profitability part doesn't always come in right away. Sometimes it's a second thought, or it's something, oh, I guess now this is a business, I should start trying to make money. So Courtney and I are both very business-minded people. We want to be profitable. It is a focus of our businesses to be successful. And that success is defined individually, right? So my idea of being successful when I owned my retail flower shop in Central Austin was being able to make, enough money to pay my bills, pay my team, pay my rent, feel good about what I was doing, and be able to bring home a little bit of profit so that I could buy a new van. I never wanted to open a second location. I never wanted to grow to a team of 30 people. So my definition of success was running and owning a small, successful, profitable business. And whatever your dream of success is, Courtney and I both are the kind of people that want to help you achieve that. So we're going to go through quickly. I'm going to introduce Courtney a little bit more. We're going to go through quickly some steps on the processes to going from your vision to your execution of a profitable floral design. And then we're going to go through some examples in EveryStem and show you how we both do this. So if anybody has any questions along the way, pop them in the chat. We're going to kind of try to run through this because I know Courtney has a busy schedule, and we want to try to keep this to an hour so that we can respect everyone's time. Somebody's saying, I love your reels, Courtney. Lindsay's at her office. She's listening. Good morning, Maria. All right. So I hope everybody's having a great day. A lot of you already know who Courtney is, but Courtney has been a floral designer for, I think, about 6 or 7 years now, full time. She started out through her college experience at Texas A&M, and she worked for some flower shops there. And then she decided after graduating from college that she really wanted to be her own boss. And I know her parents own their own small business, and I think they were instrumental in encouraging her to go out and try something and run a business on her own. So I admire that because I was 26 when I bought my flower shop. And, it's not easy to be a young person in the world and forge their own way with a business. So I think Courtney is a great person to show us and be an example of that we can all do this if we really put our minds to it. It doesn't matter how young or how old you are. And it doesn't matter, where you come from or anything like that. What matters is that you have a dream and you want to realize it through hard work. So Courtney, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to have you. And what do you think?
Yeah, I know. I'm stoked. Saying when I was young, I feel like I'm 29. I'm still young, but I started my business right when I graduated. I was 23, and I just was planning to work for them, and they were like, absolutely not. Like, you can't work here. And I was like, well, that's kind of rude. Like, all my other siblings got to work there, and they knew that I wanted to start my own business. And so they really encouraged me and pushed me. And I mean, I tell everybody I wouldn't have what I have without them. So yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, especially with social media and how big we've grown on that, and how many people that I talk to that, are a little bit older than me or are just starting out and, and they're later in life and they're looking to me when I'm so young, and we both have different perspectives on where we're at in life. And like you said, hard work, determination, and you can do anything. So I'm really excited to do this and kind of walk everybody through how I do my recipes.
Awesome. Well, let's get into it. We want to welcome you guys to Profitability 101. And hopefully everyone can see the screen here with the presentation. I'll go ahead and share this when we do the replay. So you don't have to write all of this down. If you want to take a few notes, you can. But we're going to share a replay for everybody who's not here right now. If you're watching later and you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer your questions about this if you're not live and you want to ask some questions later on. So profitability begins with planning. And what I want to do today is unpack the process of going from your vision to your flower recipe to executing your design. And that includes building profitable recipes, using smart markup strategies, incorporating your labor and design fees. Some people call it a labor fee, some people call it a design fee. In EveryStem, it is called a labor fee. So we'll probably use that as the term today. So if you use the word design fee, just know in EveryStem, you're going to see it called a labor fee. And then we want you to quote with confidence. Quoting with confidence does not mean creating a cookie cutter proposal that takes 7 days for you to create because you had to find 62 pictures on Pinterest because you're filling out some template. We want you to create a unique proposal that highlights your business, but it doesn't have to take weeks. We want a quick proposal with confidence so that way you can book the client. I'm sure all of you have heard that the longer it takes you to create a proposal for a client, the less likely they are to book you. So being responsive is super important. Do you find that, Courtney, in your business? The faster you turn the proposal over, the faster they respond?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, we have a template in Honeybook that we use, and we just plug in the quantities and then we send it out. So we don't even do mood boards or anything because we're trying to get their attention quickly with it. And then normally once they look at it, they'll email us back. But yeah, definitely being as fast as you can is the key.
That's perfect. Yeah. I've actually in my past, when I had Verbena, there were times where we were so busy in the flower shop, and I had 4 full-time employees. We were so busy in the flower shop, and maybe somebody, for whatever reason, we were short a staff member, or something was going on where we were just really swamped, and it took me a long time to get a proposal to someone, and they went with someone else. So it really, I've seen it in action personally. So we'll talk about that a
And
little bit.
and I will say really quick, being engaged and planning my own wedding, I understand why they've moved on. Like because it is so delayed that I'm like, okay, they must be so busy they don't care. And
Yep.
so now being on the other side of it, like my whole view on it has completely changed. So it is really true because I've moved on from people.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't blame you. I would do the same thing, and I feel when I was on the receiving end of that as the florist, it's like, yeah, you're right. That's on me. I'm sorry. I'm glad you found someone that works for you. And I apologize that it took me so long. Uh, So we're going to talk about setting the steps in your process. No matter the size of the event, the design, or the installation, your process should remain the same. Because if you create systems and processes in your business and strategically work through those things, you will be able to make these proposals. You will be able to create quotes. You will be able to do recipes. You will be able to organize your business much easier because you'll have those systems built in to your process. So this is a really important step. And I think it's something that everyone should realize. You don't have to use Courtney's steps and you don't have to use my steps, but you can use them as a starting point to then develop whatever process really works for you. I know some florists who really love to create super elaborate mood boards before they even book the client. They feel like that's their standout thing. They're doing super high-end weddings, and they don't get frustrated when people don't book them because they've put all that work in. But for me, that's not how I want to run my business. So it really is important to do a little trial and error and figure out what works for you. But we're going to kind of go through these steps and we'll talk about it. This was a wild, wonderfully elaborate wedding that you see here. And I was freelancing on this wedding, and we did all of the flowers at this wedding except for this ceiling installation. The client went and found someone else to do the ceiling installation because they did it for a lot less expensive price. So it's important to understand that your processes and how you work, you know, you might have a policy in place, but you might say, okay, well, this is $100,000 wedding. I might waive this one policy where I'm the only florist or I'm the only person doing flowers at the event because they found somebody who can do this one thing for a cheaper price. So there's a lot of elements in there that are going to be moving parts, but we want you to have your basics and your fundamentals down so that the chaos of those moving parts are things that you can handle. They don't create this level of like franticness because your basics aren't down. And if anybody has any questions, go ahead, pop them in the chat and we'll go through those. Okay, step one, scope it out. This is kind of obvious, but I think it's important to understand what are the possibilities within the space? What's the scale and proportion? And do you even want to take this project on? You know, Courtney has a business where she doesn't do a lot of midnight strikes. She's chosen not to do that in her business. That's not part of her business model. When I had my flower shop, almost every single wedding I did had a strike at the end of the night or maybe the next morning, but I did more elaborate full service weddings where I did a lot of, you know, urns and rentals and pedestals and huppas, and I had to get those items back. And so part of that was me going out and doing strikes. Courtney is a genius, and she's decided that she wants to do glassware and she doesn't rent candles, and she keeps her weddings a little simpler so that the client can keep those items and that she doesn't have to go back at the end of the night. So it's important for you to scope out the aspect of the design and what you want to create and really think about it in the space, in the proportion of, you know, what you want to do, and also knowing with your business model, what is it? Is this something that I even want to take on?
Yeah, and part of the strike really quick, there's two
Mm-hmm.
things. One, I like my weekends. I like to chill. I like to go to concerts, and I didn't want to be out late. And the other thing is that a lot of the girls that work for me are young. And so I didn't want them in downtown Austin at midnight cleaning up at a venue or being out that late. And I know that their parents didn't want that either. So that was a big factor as well, because if I didn't feel comfortable being there, I didn't want to put my team in that position. And so I slowly implemented that and people respect it. And I'm very transparent on why we don't clean up, but that's where it came into where they get to keep everything. So it's kind of a win-win and worked out, but there's not a lot of florists in our area that do that, I feel like.
Right. And I think there are a lot of florists in Austin that have higher minimums
Yeah.
and they require certain things, and clients want that. But you're serving a whole different kind of clientele. And there's a lot of people that don't want to spend $10,000 on their wedding flowers, but they still want a beautiful wedding. So finding that where your niche really fits in is part of this process. And that might change over time. You know, 5 years from now, Courtney might want to only do one big elaborate wedding a month. You know, that doesn't
Yeah.
mean you have to stick to what you're doing forever, right? It's planning that out and kind of revisiting that maybe every couple seasons or something like that.
And I will also taking on clients. So like when clients come to me and their inspo pictures have a ton of taper candles and pillars and votives and a lot of urns and things like that, I will tell them like, hey, we can absolutely do this wedding, but we don't include or have any of that as rental options. Like you're going to end up spending more money with me, and I'm very transparent, and I'll send them to other people that I know have all that because it's better for them in the long run.
Right.
So it really is, you do have to kind of pick and choose your, what you want to do.
Exactly. So, you know, think about the possibilities within the space, think about the scale and proportion, and think about if it really fits within to what you want to take on. Step 2, visualize and plan your installation. This can go for a design, a centerpiece. This can go for a large scale installation. This is really for, any of the designs that you want to create for an event. Sketch out the concept, whether it's in your mind or on a piece of paper or in an iPad. Just think through what it is going to be, because a lot of people tell me they have a really hard time building a recipe and they don't know how many flowers are going to go into a certain design. But thinking through the shape and the scale and the placement of the design is going to help you to understand how many flowers are going to be required to fill it out. Take measurements if you're unsure of the size. Make sure you know this is a gate at a venue called Laguna Gloria in Austin. This gate is very tall. If we brought a step ladder, we probably would not have been able to get this up onto the top of this arch, so we have to know what we're working with, especially if we're doing something on site. But don't be afraid about really thinking through the mechanics and the logistics and visualizing what you want to create. Because if you rush through that process, there's two things that can probably happen. One, you're going to underprice. And when you come into actually having to do the recipe and building the design, you're either going to be a little under with the product and the client's not going to be super happy, or you're going to overbuy based on your markup and your pricing because you want to fulfill what you promised the client, but you didn't charge enough. So you want to make sure that you're thinking these things through.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
will jump in really quick and say that we take measurements all the time with our venues that we go to. Even if it's just a drop off, we have a venue details document that has arches that are on site. Like LuAnn said, do you need a step ladder? Do you need, a really tall ladder? Like, how big is the arch? If there's arches that they have on site that they allowed their clients to use, we'll go over there and measure them all so that when a client does come, we already have all that information. We take pictures of everything that they have too, even if the venues have decor that they include that clients can use. We take pictures of that, so then we know the size, we know, how many that they have, and it looks good on you too when you're talking to them saying, hey, actually, I've been there. I already know the measurements of it, because that's one less thing that your potential client has to give you in order for you to give them an accurate quote. And I've gone to venues before we've ever even been there and asked them like, hey, can I look at the space that, our client wants us to design in, because I wasn't sure about the dimensions of it. So I would say also in that, don't be afraid to reach out to where you're going to be designing at to go see it beforehand.
Yep, exactly. I used to have a binder just like you do, Courtney, and we had all the church. We used to do there's fewer weddings in churches now,
Yeah.
but we used to have a whole section for ceremonies in churches and their rules and their guidelines. A lot of the different churches in Austin had a lot of different rules, and it's hard to keep that straight. Same thing for the venues. There are venues here in Austin that will provide containers, they'll provide urns, they'll provide pedestals. So you want to make sure that you have that. Like Courtney said, it really enables you to turn around a quote a lot faster, because if you email the venue, it can take a long time for them to get back to you. So creating a binder like that or creating a Google Doc like that is really, really a smart move. And I think it saves you a lot of time in the long run. Um, and Dusty has a question, but we're going to save that one for the end, Dusty. So we see it, and we'll do that at a little bit later on. Step 3, we're going to set the expectations. So one of the things that I love to say about being a floral designer is that we are expectation managers. We have to take a vision out of someone's brain, extrapolate it into a, a, a design with a price that works for our business and strikes a healthy balance between making the client happy and being able to make us a profit that we can continue to stay in business. And then we have to execute it with perishable product on a tight timeline. Being a florist is a really hard job. Our expectations for ourselves and our clients' expectations are super high. So I think it's important to understand that it's great to use Pinterest photos, make a Pinterest board for your business, have it there. It can be pictures that you've pulled from other florists. It can be pictures of your own work. This is a wedding that I did as a freelancer. The business owner was not there, but one other freelancer and I did this. I think it was in the one in Hutto, Courtney. What's the name of that? Yeah, it's such a cute little venue. Um, and so we went and executed this for the owner of the business, but she gave us very detailed images and she made sure that we understood that she wanted fullness in this arch with the greenery. She did not want a skinny little line of smilax. She wanted it to be wide and full, but the flowers were only to be concentrated on the one side. And the reason EveryStem can be so helpful for things like that is because you can put those notes right into the software when you're building the recipes, and your whole team is going to be aware of what's going on. So don't be afraid to use inspiration photos for scale and fullness. Make sure you can sketch. I'm a horrible sketch artist. I like to sketch. I love to doodle, but I have shown some clients some really ugly sketches, but it gets the point across. Do you ever do that, Courtney, or do you not
Oh
do
yeah.
that? Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I'm very, very transparent about all that kind of stuff because I don't want to get on site. I don't want the clients to be upset because I didn't set the expectation for them. And so yeah, I mean, some of my sketches I can't draw worth crap,
Yeah,
but they
me neither.
understand it and they get the point.
Yeah, it gets the point across. So if you can't find, if you're spending 3 hours looking for a photo,
No, no,
don't do that. Just
don't do
do a little
that.
sketch, find use their photo that they had as inspiration and say, listen, this is good. It's going to have a similar feel to this, but it's going to be smaller or it's going to be this way or whatever. But make sure that you're sharing that with the client so that way you're not setting yourself up for them having this idea of one thing and that you're providing something else. So that's
And
kind of part of the process.
I think part of the problem is too looking for inspo photos that match what the client's expectation is that a lot of people get stuck on the fact that it's not the same color palette in photos. So a lot of people ask me about it. I'm like, well, I tell them like, here's your color palette that you're wanting, but here are the inspo pics on what it's going to look like, but with your color palette. So they kind of have a hard time grasping because they don't see the full setup right there in front of them. So again, being transparent and being straight up like, hey, this is what I'm providing to you, but here's your color palette. These are the inspo photos. So if you are looking for a photo for 3 hours, don't do that. That's right there because your time is money. You know, you're
Yeah.
spending 3 hours on somebody who hasn't even booked you. You're trying to put a quote together for them. Like you need to do the quote, send it, and then you can spend 3 hours once they pay their deposit.
Right. Yes. Make sure you're waiting on that kind of stuff till after they've paid. And Eliza just said filters on photos can be misleading, which is so true. You want to make
Oh,
sure that you're
God.
clear
Yeah.
with the client, and we could get into that. That could be a whole nother thing, but just be aware that, you want to make sure that they understand that, when photographers have those moody filters that they can really mess things up too. So just, things to keep in mind as you go through this process and think it through. Okay, we're going to move on to step 4, sourcing your equipment, your tools, and your supplies. This photo is a wedding that I freelanced for my friend Mallory, who owns Lavender and Lily Floral in Austin, Texas. This was at a place called Camp Lucy. They have a venue called Sacred Oaks, and this place has a massive arch. And, always bring multiple ladders when you're doing a big arch. One ladder is never enough. Building something on site takes a lot of time. You see, she has a tarp down, so we can kind of try to minimize the mess. Think through your equipment, your tools, your supplies, all those things that you need. Do you own a 6-foot ladder? How much is it going to cost to rent one if you don't own one, right? So these things are going to add cost. And one of the floral designers that I freelance for, who has a very large wedding business in Austin, she actually includes the ladder in her recipe. And she charges a little bit of money for the ladder every time because ladders sometimes disappear or she has to buy a new one. So don't be afraid to think through this stuff and make sure that you're including that. I like to include those things kind of on the front end because what happens for me, and I still do this sometimes, but I really try not to. When I first started my flower shop, I would get so excited about the flowers that I would forget to think about the supplies and the mechanics. And sometimes I would not include them in my recipe. And if I don't include those things in my recipe or in my pricing, I'm not really making the profit margin that I think I'm making.
And with this picture, we did a wedding there too, and I hadn't been out there, and I saw the photos and just was like, oh, it's like your standard size arch, not thinking anything of it. And then I get there, the thing is massive. Like
It
Thank goodness
is.
I had one of my girls with me that was super tall because there's no way I could have even reached the top. And we struggled to get the arch pieces up there. We had pre-designed them and everything, but we struggled to get them on there. And then I look back and I'm like, well, I didn't do my job. I didn't prepare. I didn't ask questions. So yeah, sourcing your equipment and making sure that you're prepared for all of that is key.
Yeah. And just thinking about the proportions of things, if it's an arch, the first time I did a wedding there too, I look back at those pictures now today. The bride had a gorgeous bouquet. We had these big cafe au latte dahlias, and it was gorgeous. But the arrangement, the designs on the arch, I wish we had made them a little bigger. It's
Same.
just a big long aisle, just a really big arch, and it just didn't have the impact. Now you can see here what Mallory's creating. This is not finished, but what we were creating here is much more impactful. A full arch with lots of big delphinium and big mums and big flowers. They're going to show up from further away. So one of the things to think about, we'll talk about this in a minute, is size of the flowers too. You don't want to put little ranunculus on an arch this big when they're not going to show up as if the aisle is, 60 feet long. So just think about the
The
process
proportion.
of going through these, items that you're going to need. And if you're the kind of person who gets super excited about the flowers, um, then, think about the supplies and hard goods first. Work through the stuff you hate first, and then go to the fun part. Okay, so build your recipe is step 5. Step 5, obviously, I am a believer in recipes. You do not have to stick to the exact recipe once you get all your flowers in and you kind of maybe rob a little bit from here to put a little bit there. That's fine. But when you're building your recipes, you really want to make sure that they're robust, that they have enough flowers for what you're thinking about building. And that's why going through a process like this can really be helpful because you're really conceptualizing like, oh, that is a big old arch. It's twice as big as my normal arch that I rent out. I might need twice as many flowers to make the same impact. Um, so, you know, just keep that in mind as you're thinking through the process. And I want Courtney to talk just a little bit about how she goes from concept to recipe on maybe not on the standard items, but on something that maybe is new to you or something that you're trying to create that's a little bit more unique.
Yeah, so when we've done stuff where we get inspo pictures or clients have specific requests that we've never done. So for example, like tropical flowers, we very, very rarely work with those. I think maybe in 6 years I've worked with them twice. I immediately get a quote from our wholesalers on the cost of it. I put it into EveryStem and then I build the recipes before I quote to the clients because I've never dealt with it. I know that tropical flowers can be more expensive, that, sometimes they're a little bit more difficult to work with. So do I need to order a few extra stems? Things like that. And so I put it all in EveryStem and then I'll send the quote to the client. Or if say if we have another client that comes to us with an install at a venue that we've never worked at and it's a big install and I know my friends have, I call them, I'm like, hey, what size ladder did you need? How much Smilax did you use for this install? XYZ to kind of get those answers before I quote. But yeah, when it comes to your recipe, like I feel like a lot of people are like, okay, here's your recipe. You have to stick to exactly what it says. And that's just not true. You're basically getting your base recipe down for your install. So if it's something you've never done, I always order a little bit extra. If in my head, I know I want 10 stems, I might put in the recipe 13 or 14. And if I don't use those in the install, then I'll take those and add them into the centerpieces or the bud vases or wherever else throughout the wedding so that they're still being used. They're just not being used in the actual design. So yeah, I mean, you don't have to stick to exactly what you say because the only person who knows is you and your team. Your clients don't know that. But yeah, I do feel like people are like, well, here's my recipe. I can't shy away from it or I can't add to it. So when we get to whenever I explain the design that I put in here, I always have a cushion for every single event. And the reason is because if you have, say if you didn't order enough product or maybe something was bad, you have a cushion in a window where you can order product last minute and not be out money and still hit your profit margin.
Exactly. Yeah. Always build your recipe more on the robust side. like
Yeah.
Courtney's saying. I feel the same way. If I'm not sure about what I need, I want to make sure that I have a little bit more. And
Mm.
one of the ways you guys can do that within EveryStem is that you can actually see how many extras you're going to have. So if you're buying, roses and they come in packs of 25, you'll be able to see on the summary page, okay, I have 3 extra ivory spray roses, or I have 3 extra quicksands, say. If you only have 3 extra, but these are a few installations that you've never done before, you might want to go ahead and adjust your recipes. So maybe you have 20 extra. And those extras are calculated in the cost and your profit margin calculations within EveryStem. I don't know if other softwares do that, but EveryStem does. And it's important for you to know that, because then all those extras, you can label a bucket or two, label it extra, and then as you're designing and as you're working, you know that you can pull from those buckets for whichever designs you're making that need a little bit more, or something's broken, or something doesn't look right. So having the system and then using the tool and going through the process and trusting that process is going to make this so much easier. When you're guessing on the front end, and then you build a recipe based on that guess, and then you don't really order based on that recipe, you just order kind of because you're unorganized and you're running at the last minute. And somebody told me a couple weeks ago they were in the wholesaler parking lot writing down what they needed to order, and they had months before started a recipe but didn't finish it. And she was like, that's it, that was her rock bottom. And she was like, I had to start with EveryStem, like the next day. And now her team is organized. They're working independently. She's able to actually source from new vendors because she has so much time. She's more organized. So there's so many things that can like shift for you if you just have the fundamental steps down for your process. Tweak them as you learn, tweak them as you go. But these steps can really make a difference if you're just kind of willy-nilly right now and you need something that's a little bit more process oriented.
And I will say the opposite too with the extras is that say if you've done all of your recipes for the entire event and you go and you look at your extras and you have 26 roses ordered, that's a ton of extra product where you might be able to go back and tweak your recipe to where, you only need 24 or 23. So you don't have that many extra left,
Mhm.
especially if it's a smaller event. I've done that to where I don't check my extras and we have all of these roses left where I'm like, okay, somebody pulled the recipe wrong because we would never have this many left. But then I miss checking it. And then I get mad because I'm like, well, shoot, I just spent all this money on a whole extra bunch of roses that I don't even need. And I will say that was one of my favorite because it was an upgrade, right? LuAnn, you didn't have it when you first
I think
started?
we had that from the beginning, but
Oh,
yeah,
well,
it
I
might have
wasn't
been
looking
something
at
that
it.
you needed to you probably learned how to use it as you went. Yeah.
I definitely did. And once I did learn how to use it, I mean, the amount of money you save just by not ordering, one extra rose in a bunch it's a game changer. Like people don't really understand that. Or if you have multiple events in a weekend, you can merge, your recipes and your order
Yep.
together, and then that saves you even more money. So the
Yeah.
whole system's just amazing. I can talk about it forever.
Well, I think it was Allison Ellis, who's an awesome business coach. Her thing is Real Flower Business, if you guys need somebody who's really good with this stuff. But she says, if you think about like adding one rose to an arrangement, if you add a rose to every single arrangement at the end of the year, how much money is that? I mean, if you're overbuying by 23 roses every week, it adds up at the end of the year. That's money that should be going in your pocket to save for your retirement, to pay for things for your children, to go on a vacation. So it's a huge difference. No doubt, no doubt. Um,
Especially
Janet
if
said,
it's
that's my
pricier
favorite
flowers.
feature. Oh, yay. Awesome. Yeah. What were you saying, Courtney?
Especially if it's pricier flowers, like if it's toffee roses or, garden roses, things like that, like that all
Right.
adds up. And I've looked at the numbers
Mhm.
at the end of the month on my own business, and I'm like, man, I'm so dumb for not just taking like a few extra minutes to check the extras or check the other product that we have coming in with our other events because I could have, merged it together, especially if you have a big event and you have a bridal portrait bouquet, you can merge those together and then
Yep.
you're not ordering more than what you actually need. So that
Exactly.
is a
Yeah.
really good feature.
Yeah. And Courtney's the feature that Courtney's talking about is a feature in EveryStem called the
Yeah.
consolidated order feature. So if
Yeah.
any of you who are on here are members, you can go on our YouTube or you can go into the walkthroughs in the software that we just added recently. And there's a link to the consolidated feature. It's like a little 20-minute tutorial that shows you all about how to consolidate multiple orders into one big order. And EveryStem will actually take, the 3 spray roses from one wedding, if they're ivory myolicas, and 8 spray roses from the other wedding, and it's going to make sure that you're only ordering exactly how many you need. You're not going to be ordering so many bunches. So step 6, build your timeline. I think this is really important. I have a free production timeline. If anybody needs that, you can let me know, shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. Understanding how long things will take during design days, during installation days, setup days, it's really important to understand that. And it's also, a big thing of knowing how many people you need to hire. We could probably talk about this all day, but we're going to kind of just make sure that you're including it. The timeline can affect the number of team members you need, and limited venue access can require more in studio design time. So for example, I was on the team at Remy and Gold. They're an EveryStem member here in Austin. They do very lavish weddings, and we did this tent among several other installations, and a giant flower-covered huppah for this wedding at Omni Barton Creek. And I think we had 4 or 5 people just working on this for several hours. So you really need to think about the time. You don't want to be running into, not having enough time to get the job done. And so you want to make sure you're thinking about time, because that translates right into your labor fee. So make sure you're thinking about that. Do you have anything to add on that, Courtney?
I mean, I will say venue access time is like a huge factor. So a lot of what we do, I would say we do majority of our design work in our studio. So if you follow us, you know that we design our arch pieces in the studio. We prep all of our greenery for tables in the studio. The only thing we'll really do on site is if it's a bigger install, and I know that it's going to be quicker and easier to do on site. And if we have enough time, then I'll bring, an extra team member and let them handle it while I get to kind of oversee it so they get that experience. But a lot of our venues, I always ask, what's the earliest we can get there? So, say if you can get in at 10, we're coming right at 10, whether the linens are down or not, because you have to take into consideration how much time it takes to unload to get your team organized. If it's a huge install and you have multiple teams that are going all over, you don't want to be rushed when you get there on site and have to unload and then people are already splitting. You want to kind of take your time, have a minute to breathe, get organized, show your team how to do stuff, because you are the one in charge. You have to set them up for success, especially if you can't be with them 24/7. So a lot of that comes with preparing in the studio. So we prep everything and then we walk through the install in the studio so that when we're on site, they feel confident enough to be like, hey, I got it. You can go do something else. And then I come and check it. So when you have a 2-hour window and you have an install like in this photo, you know that you're going to need 10 people if you have other installs going on, which affects your labor costs, how many cars you're going to need to get everybody there. There's a lot more that goes into it than just showing up at 10 o'clock or whatever time the venue opens.
Exactly. And understanding, all of these pieces, if some of you want to get into more luxury events, you want higher budgets, you want to do some of these really elaborate designs, these are the processes you have to go through, prepping as much as possible in studio. I mean, I've done ceiling installations at places like Camp Lucy, where we've actually broken up the smilax and laid it out and reassigned it by chandelier. That way, when we get there, because we had such a limited time, it was ready to go. Working clean can save a lot of time because you're not having to clean up huge messes. So just think about and factor in all that stuff. And I know it's hard as a newer designer to think through those things, but that's why we're doing things like this, to help you understand the basics of it so that then you can kind of build a process, ask the right questions, reach out to us when you have questions, and really get the steps in line so that you can have the success on the actual event day instead of kind of scrambling at the last minute.
And really quick, I will say freelancing, if y'all have freelanced or if you've never freelanced, I always go in with the expectation that even though I have my own business and I have my own ways, when you're going to work for somebody else, you're doing what they're telling you to do. And if they ask for your opinion, then you can give it. But a lot of the times when we go in and we freelance, I typically bring one of my team members because they need an extra hand. And whether it's something that you would do the exact way or something different, and you in your head are saying, man, they could have prepped all this in the studio. They could have processed their flowers already, taken their guard petals off. They could have cleaned up the smilax, doing all that. You still have to get the install done by a certain time. So it's very tricky. And LuAnn, I mean, you freelance all the time. I freelance for a few people sometimes, but I always go in where I'm like, God, if they would have just taken like an hour in the studio with their team to prep, we could have stayed 2 hours on site. So building that time into your timeline to prep is very, very key to being organized and successful on site.
Yes, I'm a huge fan of doing everything you can possibly do ahead of time because, things do come up. We've all had a bride who didn't like something and we had to rework it. We've all had an accident where a couple boutonnieres got ripped up. We've all had goodness, I could tell you some windy stories, but things happen. So if you're not prepared, you're less likely to be able to handle the things that come up.
Yeah.
If you're prepared, you can handle more of the issues without, kind of things getting chaotic.
And handling it calmly to where nobody knows that there's an issue except for your team. And that's the biggest thing is when stuff happens on site, I tell my team, I'm like, all right, take a breath. We don't have a choice. We have to figure it out and we have to fix it with what we have. So that's the main thing too, is telling your team to chill out and not show their emotions when something goes wrong.
Yes, keeping their composure. I always used to say, you
Yeah.
never know who's around the corner. So if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. There are things that, should be saved for after you get in the van and drive drive out of there.
When you have a margarita.
Yes. So step 7, check your labor costs. Now, based on your timeline, your recipe, everything you've got going on, you're going to look back at your labor costs. Now, if you use EveryStem, you'll see that percentage labor fee line. When you turn that on your summary page, it's going to show you, and we'll show you this in a minute when we go through our examples, we're going to show you that how much you're, allocating towards labor for whatever event you're building out. So, do a quick back of the, notepad math and say to yourself, is this covering all my labor costs? If it's not, you might need to raise that amount. It's really important to know. This is the base of that arch that we were talking about earlier. You can see it better here. It's Mallory up on the ladder. You know, building something out that's on an arch this large is going to take some time. So don't be afraid to make sure that you're charging enough. And the EveryStem labor line is adjustable per recipe. So, this arch might need a 50% labor, whereas everything else might have a slightly lower labor. A bridal bouquet that needs to be wired and taped and has cascading features, that might need a higher labor percentage than, something that's just a hand-tied bouquet. Anything to add about that, Courtney?
No, I mean, again, with the labor costs comes in your time. So like they had to bring in ladders, they had to lay the tarp out, they had to bring buckets of flowers. How far is the where you're unloading to where the site is? So taking in that time because you're still paying people to be there. So whether the install, takes an hour, it takes 3 hours, you're still paying people to be there for that amount of time. So your labor is very, very important. And it is amazing that you can adjust it per recipe because there's some things that I can design way quicker than other people. So if we have a really big event, then I'm lowering that labor cost because I know I can do it 20% labor versus 30. And however it needs to be. But yeah, no, labor's a huge, huge thing.
Okay, so Amy has a question. We're going to answer that at the end, Amy. I see your question there. Is there a guide for labor percentages, Nicoletta? Yes. The average is about 30%. So I would start with that. and then you can adjust it. A big, huge installation like this might be 50%. Something really simple and easy might be, 20%, but I wouldn't go much lower than that.
Yeah.
30% is kind of the standard. Okay. And Catherine, I'll send you that production template. Okay, so last but not least, step 8, create a unique proposal for your client and present it with confidence. So I want to keep in mind, unique does not equal complicated, right? There's so many different things that people are doing now with proposals. Find something that works for you. I'll give you an example. Yeah, anybody that wants that timeline resource, shoot your email, pop your email in there and I'll send it to you. For me, when I did my proposals, when I owned my flower shop, I don't do it as much anymore because I do far fewer weddings now. I just do them for like friends and my one friend that's a wedding planner, very rarely. But I would really personalize it. So I would put their name in multiple places. I would put some things about their, relationship. I would put some things about something that was really touching to them. If their mother had passed away and we were doing something with her favorite flower on a memorial table, I would make a little note, a special note about that. I would really try to just personalize it, but I did not use a million photos. I didn't create an elaborate mood board. And I was the kind of person that could kind of pick up on a few of those things during a consultation or through a questionnaire. And it really showed the person that I was paying attention to them. It's not an elaborate thing. I've seen a lot of floral designers who now there's like this Loom video where you can kind of like create a quick quote and then walk them through it and send them a little 2-second video, 2-minute video. Unique does not have to be elaborate and it doesn't have to be time consuming. But if you go through this process and you build the recipes for all your designs and you create some standardized pricing like Courtney has done, you're going to be able to put these quotes out a lot faster and you're going to be able to be much more efficient. So, Courtney, what do you think about that?
And I would say having templates. So like when we use Honeybook as our software to create proposals and communicate with our clients, we have templates in Honeybook. So we have our proposal template for 2024. We have it for 2025. It lists all of the normal items for a wedding. It lists all of our normal centerpieces that we do. So whether that's small, medium, and large compotes, bud vases, trays, loamies, all of that stuff in there. And our clients inquire online, they fill out a questionnaire, it makes its own project in Honeybook. We pull up the questionnaire, we pull up the template, we plug the numbers in, and then if they send us pictures or a Pinterest board, I'll pull it up, I pop in a few flowers, and I send it. So the pricing doesn't really change unless, say you have like in this photo on here, you have normal bouquets instead of all baby's breath bouquets. Of course, all baby's breath bouquets are going to be less expensive than your standard bouquets with multiple varieties of flowers in it. That pricing is going to shift and change. So you can adjust it like that. There's certain things, but I can normally send out a quote in less than 5 minutes. And like LuAnn said, when they fill in their questionnaire, if they're in the military or if they're a nurse or if a planner referred them or if they found us on Instagram, if on their Pinterest board, they saved a pin from another florist, you can put in those little notes to where they see that and they're like, oh, they're paying attention, they're reading what I wrote, and then send it. So our email template for our proposal, when we send it out, it's already done. The name automatically goes in there. We adjust it some to say if they're in the military, we give them a discount. We'll put in there, hey, thank you so much for your service. We gave you a 15% military discount or whatever it is. And then we send it. So we're not retyping the same thing over and over and over again. And for the flowers in the proposal, you don't have to list every single flower. You can list a few of them and then say, and more to come once we talk. Like you can put those little notes in there because 99% of the time people just want pricing and they want to see what you're offering, where you're at. And then once they email you back, you schedule a call, you chat with them, you explain to them, hey, this is your budget, this is where you're at, but this is how we can get it down to where you're comfortable with it. So the unique proposal, like you said, it doesn't have to be complicated. We don't do mood boards, which it blows people's minds. I don't think it's a necessary thing unless a client is really, really struggling and they voice that concern to you. I'm happy to do it. It's a one page. I literally take images from Google, I put it on the Canva document and I send it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my process is very, very different from a huge wedding company that's doing these massive installs because that's not my clientele. Not that we can't do that, but it's very different to where I have it. I have templates for everything.
Yeah, and I think having a template and kind of having standardized wording, I have a whole blog post
Yes.
about really understanding, if we were doing a bouquet that was really tight and rounded, we would call that a lush, compact bouquet. And if we were doing a loose, airy bouquet, we would maybe call it, a wild, airy bouquet, right? So standardizing those wordings can help
Mhm.
not only you, because it can speed up, your templates,
Yeah.
instead of trying to think of the words you want to use every single time, put them in, you know, and have just three or four options. I mean, most brides either want, a tight rounded bouquet, a garden style bouquet, or a loose and airy bouquet, right? Those are your three standardized wording. Then you can add a little bit of whimsy in the whatever. When you get into more detail, you can do more, but you really don't need to like overanalyze the initial thing because a lot of times they're just like Courtney said, skimming it. They're getting an idea of the pricing. They want to know if you had a good kind of response rate and a good vibe together. You know, I mean, a unique proposal could be just a really cool little Canva PDF that you attach to every quote that's about you and how you run your business and the different way you do things to kind of attract the client. Then when they book, you can dig more into what they're really looking for and their designs and all that kind of stuff. So finding that unique thing for yourself is really important, and kind of understanding that's part of the process. So that way, a lot of people use, I mean, no offense, but people are using the same software. They're using the same cookie cutter proposal. They're creating the same thing. If you guys are, Courtney's not using mood boards, but she's booking plenty of weddings. So there's proof right there. I
Well,
didn't create
not
elaborate
this
mood
year.
boards and I booked plenty of weddings. I know lots of florists that don't create really elaborate mood boards and they book plenty of weddings. So it's not a requirement. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh,
One thing really quickly, and
mhm.
the key word with what you just said is that it's not a requirement. So like whenever I first started, I mean, you're in the floral world, you have to do rentals, you have to do candles, you have to have arch pieces. Like that is such a standard with what comes behind the name of a florist. And when I started running the numbers on renting candles and how much time it takes to clean them, to replace them, to store the glassware, and it's not profitable for my business. There's other people that they make a ton of money off of rentals. That's awesome. I love that for them, but for us, it just doesn't work. So you can do whatever you want with your business, even if it goes against the norm. And with me, I go against the norm all the time and I get hate for it because, that's not what we do as florists, but my business is different from every single other person's business because we're all in different markets and different countries even that it doesn't work for everybody and that's okay. So the fact that your proposals and your systems can be different is what's going to make you stand out. Like you don't want to do the cookie cutter thing. Yes, I have templates for everything, but it's different from other people. So
Your
I
templates that you've created because
that
of
I
your experience and what you want to propose to
yeah,
the client.
I mean, we shift our stuff pretty often to make it work better for us. And if clients don't want to follow our system, well, a client that does, who is inquiring and fills out the questionnaire, is going to be before somebody who hasn't given us the questionnaire that gives us the information we need to create a quote for them. So don't be afraid to go against what the norm is within our industry, because that's what's going to set you apart.
Exactly. I mean, things are constantly changing now,
Mhm.
and video is becoming more and more and more popular. So
Yeah.
you don't have to necessarily show a video of what their wedding is going to look like, but what if you created a quick little 30-second video of you of your business doing whatever it is you really love doing and showing the joy you have and saying, I want to be this joyful on your wedding day.
Easy.
It doesn't have to be, it could be the same video for every client. They don't know you sent that same video to somebody else.
Yeah.
It's just showing them that you care about them. That can be a template. That's part of the process of explaining to them that you're unique, you know? So I'm going to do mine first. It was the picture of the colorful arch with the peonies. And this is the recipe. So I'll share this with you guys in the replay. When we send it out, I'll give you this recipe. You can add it if you want to do a really beautiful spring arch. I had one large chicken wire burrito that I put in at $10. I do my hard good markup here for all my hard goods are marked up 2 times. So you can see under the event details, I have a 3 times markup for all my flowers, and I have a 2 times markup for all my hard goods. This is adjustable. So if I was to do this wedding, you know, another version of this arch, you know, 6 months from now, I might raise this markup if I need to hire more people or it's a more elaborate wedding or whatever. So these are adjustable within EveryStem, and you can change that. For those of you who haven't seen EveryStem before, this is kind of what the inside of it looks like. You've got your buttons across the top to manipulate the software and the pages. And then you've got all your buttons over here to kind of look at your event details, your fee calculator, and your profit summary. So we've got our chicken wire burrito. I put in some zip ties and attachments. I wanted to make sure that arbor that I was putting it onto was actually there on site. It's a structure that stays there. And the company, the venue's called the Terrace Club, and they're really cool because they provide the fabric. So I did not do that fabric. And they actually provide a bunch of vases and candelabras and all kinds of things. They have like a closet of decor. They're in South Austin, down like off 290 for the client. So I actually used a bunch of their stuff to make her centerpieces and things. And they're really cool about kind of sharing the information and the sizes. So I made everything in little
Design it
plastic
on site.
liners. No, we did it in little like plastic liners and then just popped them
Oh,
into
popped
the,
them in. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so it was great. So I added some water tubes because I wanted to make sure, even with the chicken wire burrito, with the moss, it doesn't always have enough water. So for the peonies, I water tubed those, and a couple other things like the bougainvillea, I water tubed. I bought 6 plants of bougainvillea. So I bought the plants, they were hanging baskets, and then I cut them up on site. Bougainvillea does not last very long. You can buy fake, but this was perfect bougainvillea time of year. I think it was like middle of May. So I went ahead from my wholesaler, Austin Flower Company. I bought 6 plants and we cut them up, and they are sharp. They have a lot of thorns, so you got to be careful with those. But I water tubed those. We've got 10 coral charm peonies. I think I actually only used 9 because one of them just never opened. So there's an example of always having a little bit extra. A cymbidium orchid, 25 carnations, 35 kahala roses, 20 quicksands, 20 Amsterdam roses, 15 yellow ranunculus. Now, this was a pretty big arbor, but the ranunculus in May can be massive. So I did use them. I would not typically put ranunculus in a big arbor like that, but they just had that right pop of color. She wanted just little accents of that kind of softer yellow. So that's what we did. Some salal just to kind of be extra sure that I had enough coverage. And then the small box of Smilax, I did 3/4 of the box. And then the other 0.3 of the box, I went ahead and used, she had some candelabras inside that we used Smilax on. So do these line items save for future quotes? For example, the cost of Oasis or chicken wire? Yes, you only input, Nicoletta, you only input every one of these items into your system once. There's this thing up here called the library, and that houses every item that you create. So you can build your library and then you can click on add item. And all my hard goods start with the letter HG. So you can see that every hard good item that I've created and saved to my library comes into this library, and then I can add it to the page I'm working on, or I can add it to all the pages. And then if I need to adjust the price, I can adjust the price pretty easily by just clicking on that item. So if it's a bigger chicken wire burrito and just for this event, I want to put in a $20 price, I can adjust that. It will save it in this event. It won't change it in the library unless I go in and change it there as well, because we want to make sure that if we want to change it only here, we can change it here.
And
So
your hard
it's
goods have the secondary markup.
yes, the hard goods all have my secondary markup.
Mhm.
That's a great point, Courtney. You can have a primary markup in EveryStem or a secondary markup. A lot of softwares, at least a few of them, only have one markup. But as florists, we all know that we typically mark up our hard goods a different amount than we mark up our flowers. So you have the opportunity to pick the markup that this goes under, and then you can adjust that markup per event up here. So if I wanted to make my hard goods for this event 2.5, I could raise that there. So everything is really adjustable in EveryStem. I think that's why a lot of people like it. It's very flexible and you can make adjustments super easily.
And it's super user friendly.
Yay. Thank you for saying that, Courtney. I appreciate it. So when we look at this total, our cost of flowers is $461.40. I'm multiplying that by my markups. So the total cost is $461.40, but any item that is a hard good is being marked up times 2, and any item that is a flower is being marked up times 3. So I'm taking that and marking that up. We'll just say times 3 for, rough math's sake. And then I'm adding 30% on top of that because I want to put my labor fee on top of my retail price. I know some other softwares are not doing that correctly. So make sure whatever program you're using is adding that on top of your retail price. And then we're getting to the software telling us that we need to charge almost $1,800 for this design. And I charged the client $1,800. So I had a difference of $20.04. So I really thought through each of these steps as I built this out. You can see I've got my hard goods, and then I've got my supplies, and then I've got my flowers after that. And then if we look at the summary page, this is where we're going to see what we were talking about with Courtney with the extras. So for example, now this was just the arbor. I did a full wedding here, but I am only showing you the one design to kind of keep it simple. So I didn't technically have 11 extra carnations because I probably used them elsewhere and ordered more. But if I was only doing this one design, I would have 11 extra carnations. I would have 0.3 extra of a box of Smilax and so on. So when we look at the total, we're going to see that we're taking the total cost of all the flowers we're buying for the recipe, plus all of the costs for the extra flowers. These are all the flowers that we have to buy to hit the wholesale pack quantity. I can't buy 11 carnations. I have to buy 25. And we're adding those together to get our total cost. So we're taking what we're charging the customer. I charged them $1,800 and I made a 70% profit margin on this. And that's including those extras. I think overall on this wedding, I went back and looked at it the other day. I made a 73% profit margin after I added all the other designs. So yeah, it was awesome. And this was a client who I had done other family members' weddings before. It was after I sold my flower shop and everything, but it was so much fun to do this couple's wedding. And you can see here, just for this arbor, the labor fee, that 30% that you saw that I added as a percentage is being represented here in dollars. You can see it's $410.76. So I need to make sure that my labor for designing that arbor stays within that amount. That's part of the total there. Nicoletta's asking, how do you decide how much to charge for a chicken wire burrito? I just look at the cost of those items. I kind of add it up. I know a box of moss is $40. I know my chicken wire roll is, I don't know, I think it was $25, give or take. And then I just kind of divide it out and do a rough count, and then come up with a price. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm not putting in that I use 6 zip ties. I just want to make sure that I'm allocating some portion of the cost of that item plus a markup to cover it. So hopefully that helps, Nicoletta. Now, if anybody else has any questions, pop them in the chat. We're going to switch over to Courtney's event, and she is going to show us. So I'm just going to switch back. Let me see. I don't know if you guys can see down here, but this is the picture of Courtney's design. It was a beautiful baby's breath base with really beautiful neutral colored roses and delphinium. So we'll go pop over to EveryStem and go into her event. So she was kind enough to give me access to this event. The only thing I put in was the arch, so we can just focus on that today. So Courtney, I'm going to let you go ahead and take this away. I'll kind of scroll down as you go.
So this one was a brand new install for us. We've worked on broken arches before. We have our own base that I had custom made because it became so popular. So many people were asking me. So we just had it made, paid for it, and we do rent it out. But it is something that I have on hand because when we're doing an install like a broken arch, I want to be in control of the mechanics. And I knew that we would have to do stuff in the studio to prep ahead of time for it. But with this install, we had never done a wedding that had no greenery. So I was freaking out. I asked a bunch of my friends, my floral friends, about it, who kind of specialize in that area, and they kind of guided me. But what I did with this is that one of the main things that I pride myself in and with my company is that you can't see mechanics. I don't like to see foam. I don't like to see chicken wire. I don't like to see any of that stuff. So with the broken arch, I knew that we would have to do something to cover the base of the actual arch. So what I did, if you'll scroll down a little bit for me, LuAnn, is that I actually got garlands, baby breath garlands, and wrapped the broken arch to cover up the mechanics. So when I start designing it, I don't have to stress about covering the mechanics. I can put the cages on, wrap the garlands around it, and then the base is covered. The mechanics of the design are covered. So with that in mind, then if you'll scroll back up for me, please. I went ahead and still put baby's breath in there because I knew that the cages somehow would have to be covered. That's the least expensive thing as a coverage to use. And so I put 4 bunches in there, and I knew that that was probably a lot, but I wanted to be able to have that little bit of cushion for it. And then based off of her inspo pictures, I just kind of rough estimated 40 stems of quicksand, 40 stems of playa, 40 stems of cappuccino, 40 stems of Vendella, 50 stems of spray roses, and so on and so on. So again, I overestimated what we were going to need because 1, I had never done it before, and 2, I wanted to have extra stuff just in case, 1, if things broke, we would have a backup plan. And if they did break, we could add them into the bud vases that she had throughout the entire venue. So I already knew that, if we did the entire design and we had stuff left over, we were going to use it somewhere else. So the mechanics for it, so I do mine a little bit different than LuAnn's. I use that supply down at the bottom, that cost right there for all my supplies. So my supplies are listed typically at the top where it says main altar broken arch, it would say dash 4 large cages, 2 9-inch loamies. So that tells my team the supplies that they need to pull. But for this one, again, since I had never designed this specific install on it before, I had to play with the mechanics. So my team didn't pull anything because I wanted to figure it out with the garlands on there and how many cages I would need. So that cost down there, that $41 includes 2 loamies, and I believe it was 4 small cages, like 1/3 foam cages and 1 2/3 cage that we ended up using. And that was my supply cost. So that includes 2 zip ties per cage, all of that stuff. But moving forward, we've implemented putting our supplies in there like LuAnn had, her hard goods supplies, so that okay, if you have 18 bridesmaids, you're going to need 18 vases, and that they're paying for those because we're not getting them back. So moving forward, we'll probably do that to where that supply cost isn't at the bottom because you have to do your own markup. So we had a quantity of 1 broken arch, but we have $41 because we know the supplies versus, you get what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah,
Jessica was asking a question very similar. When you put in the zip ties as a hard good, gets the 30% labor charge. If you list it in supplies, that's not getting added. How do you decide to list it as a hard good or a supply? So I think that initially, when EveryStem was created many years ago, several years ago now, 4 years ago, we did not have two markups. We only had one markup to start because it was our minimum viable product. We wanted to make sure people were using the software. So this supplies at retail value line was kind of a way for people to be able to put a placeholder in for items that weren't at that single markup. Now that we have two markups, which we introduced like a year after we launched the product, more and more and more of our members are putting the supplies in as items. But this supplies line also allows you to put in whatever pricing you need. And I mean, $41, honestly, like we want to be very thorough and we want to think things through. But on a $4,500 item, 30% on $41 worth of supplies at retail is not a big deal. We'll see in a minute when we switch over to the summary page that Courtney has made a 75% profit margin on this. So, there is a little bit of wiggle room there. And that is correct. Jessica's right. If you're putting it in here, it's not getting this 30% labor fee marked up. But I think because Courtney's doing a little bit of an experimentation here, since it was a newer design for her, I think having that little bit of flexibility is not going to make a huge difference on the profitability of the design.
Yeah, and I mean we mark it up. So again, if a vase is costing $1, we'll put that 2 markup or 2.5 markup depending on what it is.
Exactly. So this
So
is
I
with the 3
know,
times markup or 3.5 times markup already.
yeah. So I know that we're not breaking even on supplies. We're making money on it.
Yep.
Might not be making as much money as we normally would because we were experimenting with it.
Right.
But I know that we're not losing money.
Yeah.
So with this install, what we ended up doing is that I was so nervous about it that I did it in the studio. So I put the cages on there. I created the Lomi dishes. I set the entire install up and I played around with it with myself for a while. And then once the team got there, I explained to them to walk them through it because when we're in the studio, I have time to explain it to them. Will they probably ever do this by themselves? Probably not, but if they need to, they know how now. So we put the cages on, we took the garlands, we wrapped it around the entire structure, and then we took that baby's breath and we basically greened in our cages. And the reason that we did that is because one, I had space in our walk-in cooler, so I knew that we could do it ahead of time and put it in there and it'd still be fine. And then when we transported it, we just put it on its back, transported it to the venue and popped it up. So just doing that little bit ahead of time saved an hour, 2 hours maybe, because I already walked through all the mechanics in my head, even though it was an install we had never done before. And with this client, they fully trusted me and her planner. They were basically like, here's our inspo pictures, here's our color palette. We trust you, do your thing. I knew that this install was going to be really expensive because of the orchids that were in it. People think, they're beautiful. We love them. Well, they're a ton of money, wholesale costs, and they're very, very fragile. So
Yeah,
that's
they
what
were like $27 a stem here. So multiplying that
yeah,
times the 3.5 times markup you have, that's a pretty high price. Yeah.
a lot of money, yeah.
Yeah.
And
And worth every penny, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah. But one thing somebody told me is that, so say if you only need 2 stems of an orchid, you can go buy a plant. And
Yes.
it's so much cheaper.
Yep.
And I kind of like hate myself because I never even thought about that. And I've
Oh yeah,
bought,
I bought
you
plants. I
know,
used to buy plants all the time. Yep. I bought the
no,
bougainvillea plants for the arch, I mean, sometimes it's just a more cost-effective way to get the same result.
yeah, exactly. And so with this install, normally whenever I do installs like this, I price it per cage. So LuAnn's arch that she did, I don't know how many cages she used or chicken balls. But I would price it per cage and then I do my recipe per cage. So we do it like that. And then if you need a few extras to connect the pieces, then we already have that in the recipe, if that makes sense. Um,
Yeah,
and
it
that's
does.
that's how my brain works and can see it. Because
Mhm.
when you look at a structure, typically you can tell how many cages are in your head, how many cages are going to need to be used. And that's kind of how I break it down. So when I do my quotes, I actually do it backwards. I quote it with what the client's comfortable paying and their budget and everything. And then I work backwards and create the recipe that way. And I'm very transparent. If they send me something that's $15,000 and their budget's only 2,000, I say, hey, this is what I can do. We can do one cage up here. We can use carnations. We can use mums. It'll be really full. It'll get your same vision. It'll just be a little bit less expensive and different flowers. So I work backwards, whereas a lot of people do their recipes first, starting out, because they're not sure how the math is going to work out. But like LuAnn can look at something and say, okay, I know that we need this much greenery, this many stems in this certain vase. Whereas I can see a container and I already see the recipe in the container in my head, which is weird. And I don't really know how that happened because whenever I started out, I mean, LuAnn knows I was over ordering everything. Like I didn't even know what I was doing in the beginning. But then I found EveryStem, and I tell LuAnn all the time that it literally changed my entire business. Like we don't do any design, any order, anything without having a recipe for it. And my team is spoiled because when they work at a flower shop or they do, work for somebody else who doesn't do that, they now understand like, wow, they're losing money because we're over ordering.
Oh,
And so, I mean, everyday florists ask me if this is a good software for them, and it is. You can tweak your recipe. You can use basic flowers, from your standing order, and adjust the color with whatever you get. So you can have your set recipes already and just adjust it with the colors that you get in. So you can see, the breakdown of the summary right here that we quoted 4,500 for it. The retail cost was 44. We had a $60 kind of cushion on it, which again, this was an entire wedding. So that's, I mean, we had more on there.
yeah, this
But
would just be for the one item. So you guys have to remember it's just the one arch kind of taken out of an entire wedding. So it would look slightly different if we had all of Courtney's bouquets and centerpieces and stuff from this wedding. But with just this one item, the extras are probably a little high. But that's okay because she's still got a 75% profit margin.
yeah, so we still hit our profit, and it's not always 75. It's normally between 70 and 75. But having that little bit of cushion, because say if, we were designing in the studio and we needed more baby's breath, I could call up my rep and say, hey, I need 2 more bunches and feel okay with that because I know we're still hitting our profit margin. We have that little bit of cushion to where we can afford that and not be out money. Or, say if you had a whole 2 bunches of flowers come in bad, you can get it replaced with something else and still have that comfort of knowing, hey, we're not losing money. Um, and
Exactly. Yes, that's
I
so
mean,
important. Yeah.
it is so important. And people ask me like, well, why are you leaving a cushion? You're not giving the client everything that they paid for. No, we are, because I'm leaving myself a cushion. So when I'm designing a bouquet, or for example, this install, if I thought that it needed more orchids, I could order more. Or if we had extra spray roses left over and we still had holes we needed to fill, I can pull it from our extra buckets, all of our red buckets, and add it in and still be okay. And even if, on site we designed the whole thing and we didn't use all of the flowers in that recipe, again, we're taking those flowers out, we're adding them in the bud vases. If the welcome sign needed stuff, we're going to add it throughout. I'm not going to just walk out with like 4 buckets full of all these extra flowers, which typically you wouldn't have, but
Right.
they're getting what they're paying for. And typically with the extras, if I think a design is empty, I'm going to add more stuff into it. I'm never going to deliver something where I know specifically, okay, here's our recipe. We can't shy away from it. No, as the owner, you get to make that call. And say if, at the end of the day, the profit margin was 67% or 68%, and your client was over the moon and thrilled and happy, it's worth it. But
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
typically it's between 70 and 75, depending on it. And this wedding was a little bit different. It was like a micro influencer, I guess you could say. So flowers were a big deal to her. She wanted those more expensive flowers. Whereas somebody else, I would say, hey, let's use carnations. Let's use maybe one focal flower, expensive rose, maybe 2 or 3 orchids versus 9,
Mhm.
and kind of help them get that vision, but on a lower budget.
And everybody, Courtney does share a lot of her recipes on her Instagram subscription. So if you're not a member of her subscription on Instagram, you might want to consider doing that if you are struggling a little bit with building recipes. I'm always here to help. I just helped somebody the other day. They're like, I have to build this arch. I was like, let me have a little shot at it. I love building recipes. I mean, I created this software, so there's something I when I get the opportunity to help someone build a recipe, it's great. I mean, I can't do that for everybody all the time, but helping you here and there is so much fun for me. And so when you're looking at this summary page here and you're looking across the front of this page, you see the extras column here. This is what we're talking about with the extras. So according to this, Courtney was going to have, the 3 extra phalos. She's going to have 5 extra stems of Queen Anne's. She's going to have 10 extra playas, 10 extra quicksands, and 10 extra vendulas. So now if you're looking at that and you're like, okay, because she's buying 40 vendulas and they come in packs of 25 each, she has to buy 50. She's going to have 10 extra. So what she and I both like to do is after we process all our flowers, we go through the list, we make sure we got everything that we ordered. Label a couple of buckets extras and pull these flowers off to the side. And that way you know what your extras are and you're not stealing from something that you need. Now, these are represented here at the bottom as the extras cost, and they are included in the total cost and in this profit margin calculation. So if Courtney were to use every stem of what she bought, she's going to have this profit margin. If you have a retail shop or you can sell a one-off arrangement to a customer, this profit margin will only go up because you're selling some of those extra flowers to someone else. This is basically the lowest profit margin she's going to make. So if it's at 75% and she's really concerned, am I going to have enough? She could go over to that recipe and say, okay, instead of 4, I'm going to make this a little bit extreme. I'm going to say like 8. And let's see what that does. It makes her difference negative. So this is the amount, the difference between what she's charging the client and what the software is telling her to charge the client based on her markups and her recipe and her labor fee. So she's technically over budget for what she's charging the client. But if she's very concerned about making sure she has enough and she's never done this before, if she goes back and takes a look, she's still making a 74% profit margin, and she's only $100 over budget on something where she's charging $4,500. Now, eventually, she wants to get to where this number is never negative. But if you're a beginning florist or you're just doing something that you've never done before, give yourself a little grace. It's okay. A 74% profit margin is still super healthy. We want this to be around 70 or above. So having a little bit of a negative number here, okay, although it's not ideal, if we make the client super happy, as Courtney was saying, and we end up with a 74% profit margin, it's great. We're all winning. And that's what I like to call striking a healthy balance between giving the client the best of everything and making money, because this profit number, this profit margin is based on the cost of her items. She still has to take out her expenses. She still has to take out her payroll, which ideally is this much or less. But this is, gross profit margin. It's not net profit margin. We still have to take out all our marketing expenses, all our gas, all that stuff has to come out of our rent, and everything has to come out of this amount of money. So we don't want it to go down too low, but we don't want it to be too insanely high. We want to find that happy place where we're finding our happy price, and we can make sure that we're not only making the client happy, but we're able to stay in business and make future clients happy as well. So Courtney, let's answer a couple of these questions, because I know we're getting almost to 12:30 and you probably need to go. I know there were a few questions. Let's see. I know Dusty had one up here that was early on. Let me see. Okay.
Whoever said Trader Joe's, I don't have a Trader Joe's by me, or else I'd be the one there right when they open buying their product.
Right? Seriously. They have some good stuff.
But I
Okay.
mean, that's the thing, is that like how you're competing with grocery stores like that buy product in massive quantities, and yet we're still having to explain to people, well, this is why we charge this because we're a small business. So I feel like a lot of the times when you're trying to get clients is that I've found that it is way more beneficial to be open and honest with your clients than to, like you were saying in the PowerPoint, set your expectation to basically just tell them what they want to hear and then not be able to deliver it. So I've had people say, well, I can get them cheaper at the grocery store. I was like, well, yeah, you can, but they're not taking care of it like we are, So
Because
anyways,
they have to go to the grocery store themselves, purchase it, handle it, deliver it, set it up. Whereas for us, we're doing all of that for them. It's
yeah.
apples and oranges, absolutely.
Mhm.
Um, so for Dusty has a question, popping in a question for the end. Courtney, have you had any negative feedback from coordinators or venues on not offering a strike? I adopted the policy from you and recently have had some negative feedback on that. What do you suggest telling them?
Yeah, so something like this, I mean, we did have a little bit of pushback in the beginning, but at the end of the day, your client has signed your contract. I don't work for the venue. I don't work for the coordinator. They just happen to be involved in the wedding. So for example, a lot of things that we do, the client gets to keep everything. So they're basically going to pay us to come back and consolidate stuff on a table. Or if it's hand laid greenery, they're paying us to come back to clean up something that they can keep. So I explain it to my clients like, hey, if you want to go this route, that's great. We don't provide cleanup. All the containers are yours to keep, all the bud vases, all the compotes. If you don't want it, you can throw them away. If the venue doesn't want it, they can throw it away. If it is an install, so say if we're doing Smilax on a wall or Smilax on a chandelier or something like that, it is the client's job to figure out who's going to clean it up because we don't offer that. So when I speak to the client right away in our email that goes back when they fill out our contact form, it states we do not provide cleanup. Unless it's a certain ordeal, then we will. But that's something that the client handles. And I tell them that, if it becomes a huge issue between the coordinator and the venue and the client and they're getting stressed out and we're going back and forth, of course, I'll pop in and say, hey, our cleanup fee is, $1,000 or whatever it might be, and I'll handle it because I don't want the client having to deal with that. It's unnecessary stress. But normally, if it's Smilex on a wall, I make it to where somebody can just go and pull it and the whole thing comes down. And then some of the venues, again, the venue is not signing my contract, my client is. So if my client's signing it, it's up to them to figure out what family member or friend or pay the coordinator if they want to do that to clean it up. This is what we're providing. This is our expectation. This is our guideline. And if they don't like that, I'm happy to provide them with another florist that does do those services. But I stick to my guns on stuff. And if people don't like it, then that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Um, so Suzanne is asking, how do you get the broken arch structure back? I think in that particular case, Suzanne Courtney was at that wedding, so they did do a pickup. Is that correct? The one
Um,
where you did the
that
example here.
That broken arch was at a venue that we work at all the time. So I had already talked to them about leaving it because they were moving it inside for the entire wedding. And again, I'm not going to keep my team there for hours to clean up just that particular piece. So the venue was nice enough to store it in their room for us. And then the next time we came back, we picked it up. But again, if that's not the case, our clients know, hey, you're renting this structure from us. It is your job to bring it back to us the following week. And the same goes with this is the only arch that we have is our broken arch, and then we have tall stands that we rent, and the clients know they have to bring it back to us, and they're completely okay with that.
And then let me see, there was another one. Let me go back up here. What's your markup for supplies, 2 or 2.5 times? Eliza's asking.
I want to say it's 2.5,
Okay.
but I think
I go
again,
back
I
and forth.
think
Sometimes I use
I
2, sometimes I use 2.5. It
was about
depends.
to say, I think it just depends on what it is, but it is between 2 and 2.5.
This says, do labor fees include delivery from Tiffany? I say no. Delivery fees should be on top of this. This is for building recipes and figuring out your pricing. If you want to include labor fees, you're going to use this fee calculator and you can add your fees here and it will get you to your grand total. but you should definitely be charging a delivery fee on top of your labor fee. What do you think about that, Courtney?
Yeah, no, 100%. And you have to think too is that for me, we charge per mile. We have two delivery cars and my personal vehicle. So say if we have a really big wedding that we're going to and we need 5 cars, we might be charging more for delivery because we're having 5 cars go. So ours kind of shifts depending on how many people are coming. But yeah, delivery is definitely added on top of that.
Okay, and then let's see. For arches or similar installs, if you do not have the measurements, do you provide a starting price or a range for the quote, or just say you can't quote without the additional information? What would you do typically, Courtney,
Let me read
in
it
that
again. Sorry.
situation? So say, you don't know the exact measurements of something in the quoting stage. Would you give her a rough quote, or would you say, I need to find out how big this is before I can give you a quote?
Yeah, no, I typically give them a starting price because again, when people inquire, they're wanting an idea on pricing. So say if you're starting your, arch pricing at $600, they're going to say, okay, in my head, I need to budget this much for floral. And typically for the arches and something like that, they're going to provide pictures of something. Or if it's a venue that you've worked at, then you kind of know, you might not know the exact measurements, but you can look up the venue and look up the pictures of the structure and kind of get an idea. I also look at the inspo pictures and see how many cages that that's on that structure. And then kind of in my head, I kind of have an idea on how much to charge. So I typically try to always give them a starting price. And in the email that goes out with the quote, I always say that pricing can vary depending on, the design that you're wanting, the flowers that we choose, your budget. We don't have a minimum to use us. So I really, really try to help our clients maximize their budget as much as possible. So I would definitely put some kind of starting price in there. What do you think, LuAnn?
Yeah, I think a starting price or even a range. I mean, if you feel more
Yeah.
comfortable as a designer saying, I would say that this could range between 2,500 and 3,500. I think that's okay. But then when I built up the total price, when I added it all together, I would definitely include the higher end of that.
Mhm.
Uh, and I think it depends on how you work. I like to tell a lot of my clients, there's two ways we can do this. We can do the dream scenario,
Yeah.
or we can do what's going to fit within your budget. And Courtney typically likes to work with what's going to fit within the client's budget because it's more efficient, it's easier, it's more practical, and it saves everybody a lot of time. Now, when I had my flower shop, I did bigger, more elaborate weddings with strikes and more intense installs. And so I typically would give them the dream scenario if it was within reason. And then maybe I would say a cheaper alternative, and I would put that in quotes and say, if instead of you want to do this full lush arch, maybe we could do an arch with two cages and just smilax in between, and that's going to be this price. And so that way you're just giving them two options. Let them decide. It doesn't take that long once you feel comfortable after you've kind of established some basic pricing. So Amy
And the
says, I
quote
have, oh, sorry, go ahead, Courtney.
No, you're good. I was gonna say the quote that we normally send out is kind of like their dream proposal. It's 99% of the time it is always over the budget that they've provided us because clients don't know. And they're going based off of the budget trackers for weddings that's on Google that was from 100 years ago. And a lot of that is just not accurate. And it's hard because every florist pricing is going to be roughly different. Not, I don't share a lot about our specific pricing on my platforms because my pricing is different than LuAnn's in a sense because LuAnn had a flower shop. I don't have the overhead of a flower shop because my studio is in my house. I still pay rent and electricity and all that, but it is different. And I would just say that, oh God, I lost my train of thought.
Well, I think you just have to find what
Oh,
works best for you. And that's
yes.
the process
Yeah.
of trial and error. I mean, business is one long experiment. And
Yeah.
if you look at it from a curious standpoint and you look at it from a standpoint of, okay, maybe on this wedding I did not make 75% profit margin, right? When you first start with EveryStem, a lot of our members who first start see some negative differences, and they see some profit margins lower than what they would like to see, because this is step one, is kind of being aware of where you're at. And then step two is starting to make some improvements and make changes. Like, I don't think Courtney was making 75% profit margins on her weddings when she first started with EveryStem.
Oh, heck no.
But that's a process that she's gotten to. So she's making significantly more money now. I think you were maybe closer to like 60 or 65 when you first
Yeah.
started.
I mean, maybe even like 55, 60. Like I definitely didn't start every sim and start, okay, 75% margin. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, you're definitely working up towards it. And I know that whenever I found every sim, I think I made my first year in business like maybe $1,000, if that. I was 23. I really didn't know what I was doing, especially when it came to recipes. I knew that I was over ordering, but I didn't know how to not do it. So every sim, it takes time to build your library. And one of the questions on here that somebody had asked was they have 3 different wholesalers. I saw it. Let me see if I can find
Oh
it.
yeah, I have 3 different wholesalers with different pricing. Please advise if I am looking at this correctly when building my library. Load the flower with the highest wholesaler cost, and then if I can use the lesser expensive wholesaler, it's okay. Or load the same flower 3 different times with 3 different prices. So, Courtney, I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll take my stab at it.
I was gonna let you answer it first. Um, so I will say I'm very different when it comes to wholesalers. I have a lot of accounts with different wholesalers, but if you follow us, you know that my loyalty lies with Pikes. In Austin, they're very local, and the reason is because of their team there. Rachel is my rep, and I will say in the very beginning, I made an account with them. I had a different rep and it didn't work well. I ordered from them. The product was just not up to my standard and I struggled really hard with it. But then things changed and I went back to them and I found Rachel. So I 99% of the time only order from Pikes. And when I put our recipes together, all of our flowers are coming from Pikes. So if we get a flower back or if we get an order acknowledgement from Pikes back, and say, the toffee roses are $18 a stem, which is insane, but say that that's the price that they're getting at. I'll go back into every stem to the recipe. I'll use the swap feature and I'll swap it for a different wholesaler. So say if I'm getting it from Southern or Austin Flower Company or Mayesh or wherever, I'll swap it to see what their pricing is because nobody can afford $17, $18 a stem for that. So you're going to have to find it somewhere else. I am loyal to Pikes because of my rep, because she goes the extra mile. She knows that I'm not going to pay that amount of money for it. So she'll come back and say, hey, why don't we try using this? Can you sub it for this? Um, I've never done it like that. I wouldn't recommend putting the flour in there 3 different times, the 3 different prices, because you're not going to get an accurate recipe at the end. If you have the same flour in there 3 times. So I look at it differently. LuAnn's going to know better about this because I order from typically one wholesaler. But if you follow us, I did a wedding in Maine and we got product from Mayesh. It was a nightmare. I don't know how people use Mayesh, but Rachel ended up having to send us product from Pikes because they just didn't deliver on it, but we didn't have a solid relationship with a rep there. My rep there had left. She didn't tell me. We didn't have anyone kind of backing us if problems went wrong. So I look at the wholesaler as finding somebody who you have a good relationship with and building confidence in them that they're going to provide the best products to you. So LuAnn, you're going to say stuff differently probably with it because I only order from the same person majority of the time.
Yeah, I think that having a really key relationship with your wholesalers is important. And I think it
Yeah.
depends on your business, where you're located, how far you are from wholesalers. My
Mhm.
business was in central Austin. I could walk to my favorite wholesaler, Austin Flower Company. I walked there on a daily basis for 12 years. I had an amazing relationship with them, and I bought 95% of my product from them. And I had such a great relationship from them that if someone else was willing to give me a better price, I would often go to them and say, hey, this person's willing to give me a better price, but I'm going to buy 600 of these hydrangeas for this wedding this weekend. Do you guys want the business? And I would let them decide. They could match the price or not. But there's so many different elements that go into it. It's so custom to each business, you know, which wholesalers you use, and do you buy locally grown? Do you buy from farms? You know, everyone's in these different situations where, you know, if you have 5 flower farms within 15-mile radius of you, you might not be buying from a wholesaler, you know? So I think it really depends. But in the case of how you're building your library, I think if you're buying from one wholesaler the majority of the time, I would just create that item once. I would put in that wholesaler name and put in that wholesaler's price. And then if there's an event where you're not able to buy from that wholesaler, you can just click on that item, change the name, and change the price for that one particular event. But if you're the kind of florist who's buying from 3 different wholesalers on a regular basis, and you want to be able to just open up your event and see, you know, who you're buying from. Like you can see here, I've added these because Courtney had them this way, but she has pikes, garland, baby's breath, 5 foot. You know, whereas if you see in mine, I might have amaryllis from Mayesh or amaryllis from AFC. So the nice thing about EveryStem and creating your own custom library is that you build it the way your brain works and the way you want to talk to your team and the way you want to kind of communicate with your vendors. Because when you break this out, if you have the vendor listed here, it's going to break out your order by vendor, which is awesome. We are building a more robust flower library that is going to be for sale. It's going to have over 650 different flower varieties. They're going to be broken up by color. So you'll have stock pink, stock white, stock, you know, raspberry pink, and you're going to have a photo preview included. And it's going to be an upsell. It's going to be something that you have to pay additional for, because I think that most of our members like creating their own library. I think Courtney realized after she got started, yeah, it's a little time consuming at the beginning, but now that she has most of her items in there, it's so easy and it's so much more customized. So we're going to give people the option. You can buy a library that's preloaded, or you can build your own library. And if you buy the library that's preloaded, it's $124.99 right now. We're adding it. It's a new thing that we're just about to launch, but you can still put your own items in addition, and there's no limit to how many items you put in. So it's really nice to be able to have that variety. Let
And
me
I would say
scan through.
if I had just joined EveryStem and that was an option for me, I would have bought it. I would have done that, but I'm so OCD and type A and anal that I wanted it to be a very specific way, because I'd say probably 99 to 100% of the time, I don't pull the recipes. I don't do any of that. My team does that. So I
Mhm.
want it to be very specific on the certain things that they're doing. And that's why it is, there's a space, there's a dash, there's a space, it's capitalized. The only thing we haven't done yet is add in the photos, which I mean is incredible because a lot of my team is still learning. A lot of them don't know floral, and that's a great aspect to have on there. So if it were me, and if you're new on here listening and watching and you're on the fence about joining EveryStem, one, obviously do it, because it's gonna, I promise you, it's gonna change your business, but you have to be willing to put in the work in the beginning. You have to set your library up. You have to take the time to learn it. And it is so user friendly. And LuAnn has a million videos on every aspect of it. And I think that's one thing, LuAnn, me and you connected so well, is that you're not just, here's my company, figure it out. You're so helpful with any questions. Cause I know I struggled with stuff. I was like, okay, I keep getting an error. Like, what's happening? I emailed you, and like 2 seconds later, you emailed me back and it was fixed. Or you told me how to fix it. So with EveryStem versus Curate or Details and those other really big companies, I'm sure they're great softwares. If you need something that has proposal making and all the things in it, but EveryStem is specific just for recipes. So that is one of the reasons that I'm so hardcore about it, is that I don't want all the other hoopla involved with it. I want it to be user friendly, easy. I want to have, have it set up the way that I want it. But if you're on the fence about it, I really, really highly recommend it. One, because it's user friendly. That's the best thing that you can probably ask for, and it's not overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think different strokes for different folks, right? Like some people
Yeah.
who are already using HoneyBook, or they want to have a smaller, simpler process in their business. They're already using QuickBooks, or they're already using PandaDoc, and they're like, I just need something that does this part because I'm not making the profit that I need to make. You
Yeah.
don't have to go in and create a proposal just to price out a design. You don't have to you don't have to go through multiple levels of work to create an item. If you want to create a new item, you just click right here, put in the information and save it. It seems daunting at the beginning, but I think for people who are profit-minded and want to run their business in an efficient way, EveryStem could be a great tool. And I
Yeah.
think it's important for everybody to know that if you work through the thought process that we talked about in the beginning, just to kind of bring it all full circle, um, that 7 or 8 step process that we went through at the very beginning of the call, and really think through that as you're building your recipe. You can include in your notes, you can include an inspiration photo link, so you're tying those things together. You can put in, any notes that your designers need to know about what you're doing here. It's really important because then that communication becomes something that's not just stuck in your brain. It's something that's here that you can export, that you can email over to your designers, that you can share with them if you export it and print it out on paper, so that everyone is available and able to do their best work instead of having everything inside your head that you're not sharing in a pretty easy format.
Yeah.
Uh, so let me see if there are any other questions. It's 12:49. We went way over our time. Um,
I feel
okay.
like it was worth it though.
Yes, I think so. Tiffany has one question. When is the most appropriate time to ask about budget? Do you want to cover that, Courtney?
Yeah, I can. I asked about budget in the contact form. It's required that they list some kind of budget, even if they say, I don't know, help me, TBD, or if they put 15,000 and it honestly is more like four, because that gives you an idea. And a lot of people, again, are looking at, wedding calculators online, or, maybe their coordinators are saying, well, your budget needs to be 10% for floral. Well, if your vision is these massive installs and chandeliers and all this, your overall budget needs to be more than 10%. So a lot of what we do is educating clients, and not only clients, you're educating planners, you're educating other, vendors in a sense. But I always ask right away for their budget because I base their entire proposal off of their budget. I quote it, their, dream that they're looking for, and then I tell them, hey, here's your budget, here's what we can do with it, here's how we can maximize it. We can still give you this install, but here's your vision over here, way high up here, but this is where your budget is allowing you to go with it. So I feel like being transparent and open and having that conversation in the beginning is key.
I agree. I think the earlier the better.
Mm.
When I had my flower shop and we were doing a lot of weddings, um, it was a little bit different. Now everything's so much online. I mean, I didn't have an online inquiry form back then, but the first thing we did when somebody inquired was send them a questionnaire. And they filled out that questionnaire, and one of the first questions was, what is your budget? And if they didn't know, like Courtney said, that's okay. But I think it's really important to kind of know that if you don't know the budget, you can't deliver. You can't sell a Ferrari for the price of a Toyota, and you can't sell a Toyota for the price of a Ferrari, right? You need to kind of have an idea of what their budget is. And I've had clients that say, no budget, unlimited budget. I have no idea. I mean, I have had some clients that have spent a lot of money on their wedding flowers, and I've worked on some very elaborate weddings. But no budget, everyone has a budget. Their budget might be $100,000 for flowers, but it's a budget,
Mhm.
So getting that understanding of, you know, being a team player and telling them, hey, I care about you. I'm on your team. I want the best for you. Because if you look at what's out there on the internet right now about weddings and florists and venues and photographers, there are so many, and none of us here are doing this. There are so many vendors that do not live up to the promises that they make their clients, and that they do not do what they say they're going to do. They don't show up. They don't deliver. They don't do anything near the color palette that the client asked for. So it's important to remember these people are skeptical. They've never been married before. They've never spent this much money on an event or a wedding or flowers before. So I always used to tell my team, we do this every week, but for them, this is like once in a lifetime. So we have to kind of remember that. We have to be on their side and try to think the way they're thinking. Like Courtney just said, she just recently got engaged and she's trying to find, photographers and videographers and people who are going to help. Of course, Jen's doing the flowers because, when you have a best friend who's an awesome florist, you do that.
Yeah.
But
I don't have a budget, right? I don't have a
no
budget. I'm
budget.
a
She's
florist,
just
I
going to
don't have
make
a
it
budget.
awesome. So you have to remember that the client, sometimes when I see florists talk about these things, it feels like the client is the enemy. The
Mhm.
client is not our enemy. Our client helps us to do what we love. Our client enables us to create beautiful arrangements and make a living doing things we love. So we need to think from their perspective and say, these people are important to me. How can I make what they want work? Now, right, I said, can't sell a Ferrari for the, can't sell a Toyota, what a Ferrari for the price of a Toyota. But we need to remember that we always need to be polite, courteous, keeping them in mind, understanding, even if we're not the right fit, that maybe they'll recommend somebody else to us down the road who is the right fit.
Yeah.
So, we have to take that stuff from the perspective of saying, like, there are a lot of crappy vendors out there. Excuse my French. Dusty just said, so true. It's so disheartening. It is. I
Yeah.
think it's really a sad state. Like my friend Ava, she has Ava and the Bee. It's a marketing company. We've done some stuff with her about blogging for florists and stuff like that. And if you look on her Instagram, she's got all this information. She follows trends because she does marketing for wedding vendors. And she looks on Reddit and she looks on Facebook and she sees all these people with these horror stories of this vendor ruined my wedding. Okay, let's be realistic. You're still married. It's all okay. But that's what we're dealing with because your clients are out there reading that stuff. And then they're
Yeah.
coming to you and they want you to care about them, listen to them, and help them. So
Mhm.
it's important to ask for the budget up front, but make sure that you're asking for the budget in a way that says, I need to know your budget so I can give you the most value. I need
Yeah.
to know your budget because I'm the expert with flowers and I want to help you get the most bang for your buck. If all you need is a big beautiful arch and a big bouquet and you care most about the arch, maybe we don't do centerpieces. Maybe you
Mhm.
don't care about that part, but because you're a bride, you think you need to have centerpieces. Well, let me tell you, put some candles on the table, have the party, and if you really care about the arch, let's blow out the arch. So I think that's important to remember, like, don't forget that that's the person that you're there to serve. And yes, the customer is not always right, but at that initial stage, we really need to make them feel heard because that's what's going to get them to book. A
Yeah.
lot of florists are out there selling flowers. It's the connection between you and your client that gets them to book, I think.
Yeah, and I just really quick, I will say that, at the end of the day, I don't expect every single client of ours to be my best friend and to follow us and, chat with me all the time. But I do want our clients to feel that they can call me whenever they want. They can text me if they have an issue about, a different type of vendor, or if they need recommendations for other vendors. I want them to feel comfortable to where they can ask me. And not only the bride themselves, but also, maybe the mom that's involved with the wedding. Sometimes people can be a little hardcore. Don't get me wrong. I feel like we've all probably dealt with that.
Yep.
But I want them to feel comfortable enough to where they can talk to me about stuff, but I also want to feel comfortable to where I can tell them straight up, like, hey, your vision is a $20,000 vision and you don't have the budget for that, but this is what we can do. And again, it's all about educating them as well, because this is the only time in their life they'll plan a wedding. They have no idea except for the stuff that they're reading online. So with me, with our social media and our platforms, I finally got into my head like, okay, nobody else is out there shooting it straight. like how it is. I don't gatekeep stuff, even with other florists and with our clients. I straight up just tell them the process because I feel like most clients come, they order flowers and they think they're paying just for flowers, and they're not. They're paying for your entire team, your overhead, your delivery cars, your buckets, your water, all of that. And you need to be transparent about it. But it is sad the stuff that clients will say online about other vendors before even speaking to that vendor, because maybe they didn't have that relationship, or maybe it was just kind of awkward and weird and they just didn't feel like they could basically stick up for themselves if something was wrong. I mean, LuAnn mentioned it earlier. You've been on site where somebody's not happy and you have to fix it. And that's okay. They're a paying client, but it doesn't mean that they get to be disrespectful to you. You show me respect and I'll show you respect. So I always want our clients to leave hoping that they recommend us to other people. And if there was a problem or something happened throughout the wedding, they can tell us.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think part of the service, when you look at people's reviews online of businesses, like I'll get new EveryStem members and I'll go on their website and I'll look them up on Google just to see who is this florist that's using my software now. And a lot of times when there's positive reviews, the reviews start with the experience, the service, the level of care that they received, and then the review talks about the flowers and how beautiful the flowers were. So just remember that we are in that service business. We want to keep our boundaries. We want to make sure, yeah, like Courtney said, obviously we want to respect our clients. We want respect in return. And, I've had to fire a client. It happens. But I think it's important to really remember that when you're thinking through the process, if you're charging your happy price, and I've talked about this before, so if you don't know what your happy price is, go look on my Instagram. I think I had a recent post, or look at the January pricing for a profit workshop that we did. If you can charge your happy price, which like for Courtney for this arch was $4,500, the price you're happy to charge, that the client is happy with, that you are not overcharging, but you're happy to do the work at that price. If you do that, you're going to be less resentful. You're not going to be kind of nickel and diming. You're not going to feel like, oh man, I wish I had charged more for this. So that's why EveryStem can come in handy, because a lot of times we would not charge $4,500 for this arch if we weren't thinking through those steps that we talked about from the very beginning. If we think through the steps and we use a logical system and a software to show us what we should be charging, we're going to say, okay, naturally, we're going to start, our muscle memory is going to build up and we're going to start charging more for things, more, like Courtney's saying, oh, LuAnn can kind of come up with a price and build a recipe in her head. I've been doing this for like 18 years.
Yeah.
But if you're newer at it, you need to build up that muscle memory. And so EveryStem is like that bodyguard keeping you from undercharging
Yeah.
and overbuying.
I
Uh,
will say, like, when you do your events and you do your weddings, and say if you did, for whatever reason, over order on accident, look back on where you think you went wrong and make those notes in EveryStem. So moving forward, if you have somebody come in and they're like, hey, I love that wedding that you did, you can go back and refer to it. So, I mean, we do events all the time where I go back and put notes and say, hey, next time we need to use a rose instead of using, ranunculus or whatever it might have been, because it didn't look good in the design, or it didn't fit, or, whatever the thing might be. But it really is, there's so many different little features on EveryStem that I think people sometimes don't use it to its full potential. Like the notes, I put in notes all the time because my team is pulling everything. They're prepping everything for me, or, our freelancers, or for them to even be able to design. So where that, where the ceremony, where she's clicking right there, we would say, okay, we used, 4 cages, 4 small cages, 1 large cage, 2 loamies, whatever it might be. So the next time we do it, I already know, okay, these are the mechanics. The baby's breath garlands were on point. This is the must-have items to make this particular look work, but you can change the flowers. You can adjust everything, but you're taking out the hard part, because you set yourself up for success in the future by doing that. So all of our crazy systems and lists and notes and processes we have in the studio is because stuff has happened to where I'm like, okay, I have to implement something to help me in the future when this is exactly what EveryStem does for us.
Exactly. Yeah. I think being able to adjust the recipes after, if you're doing a big arch and your recipe is a little bit off, it's nice to make a copy. You can go into the dashboard, you can make a copy of your event, and then you can adjust the recipe and have the original version and the copied version, or you can adjust the recipe right inside that event if you want. So there's a lot of features that you can use, that are going to make it easier for you. The automations, consolidated export, things like that. But the main thing is to really work through the process and find something that works well for you so that you can make sure that you're going from the creativity all the way through to profitability. Doing this work is so hard. You don't want to do it and then end up with less than what you want to make and not being able to sustain your business. So, Courtney, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us. If anybody has any other questions, you could pop them in the chat, but I know it's been 2 hours, so we got to wrap it up. Um, you're awesome. I appreciate you so much.
Oh,
And
well, thank you for having me.
everybody's saying thank you, thank you. Uh,
Yeah, if y'all have any questions too, feel free to DM me or you can message me on whatever platform you're on. But like LuAnn said, I mean, we can both answer questions. LuAnn obviously knows EveryStem way better, but I use it every single day. We have templates set up in EveryStem. So if y'all have questions, please don't be afraid to ask. I'm happy to help anybody with anything that they have.
Yay! Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I'll send out the replay and the other things that we discussed, and I'll make sure that Courtney has access to the replay so she can share it if anybody's interested in it. I know some people said they missed the beginning, so we'll make sure you all get that. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thanks, Courtney.
Bye, guys.